Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video, and welcome back to my TBR Advent Calendar. So I think we're on day 10 now, and yeah, so far the TBR Advent Calendar is going pretty well. I'll leave some more links down below about what the TBR Advent Calendar is, and my TBR Advent Calendar, my Vlogmas this year, is very kindly sponsored by Serious Readers, who make great reading lights like the one I have here. I will leave more information down below about Serious Readers, more links to where you can find out more about them, and also the offer code I have on at the moment. But for now, let me pick today's book. So I'm going to reach down to my TBR Advent Calendar and select. This feels like a very thin one, which is exciting. Oh yes, I'm looking forward to this. This is Grave of the Fireflies by Akiyuki Nosaka, translated from the Japanese by Ginny Tapley Takamori. And this is a very short, in fact very short, it's only 67 pages, but the text is quite big as well. This is from 1968, so a Japanese modern classic, set during the Second World War, about two siblings in Kobe and what happens after firebombs destroy their home. And I think I know the story from this already because I've seen the Studio Ghibli film. It's one of my favourite films, though it is devastating, so I don't watch it very often. So I feel like this book is going to pack a massive punch. I believe this is a semi-autobiographical novel about the author's own experiences during the Second World War as a child, so I think this will be quite grim, but also really interesting. And yeah, I'll let you know later how I get on with it. Hello again, it's a bit later on in the day, I'm back, and I finished reading Grave of the Fireflies. I feel like I didn't film myself reading this very much, partly because it was a very emotional read, but yeah, I thought this was really fantastic, really well crafted and powerful. It's very short, it's probably a long short story, I think, rather than novella, though it is published individually, and yeah, was what I was expecting really, in that it is a raw, tough, very difficult read that is incredibly powerful and hard-hitting. I think the Studio Ghibli film is pretty true to the book, and captures the sort of the utter desperation and tragedy of this story. So this is a story about two siblings, an older brother who is probably in his early teens, and a little girl who is 4 years old, and we know from the very, very beginning of the book that both children will die, and then we kind of go back and see how things got to this point, how they lose their mother in the firebombing of Kobe, and how they are sort of left behind by a world at war. And it's both like exceptionally sort of stark and just like really touching and moving, and there's some really like powerful points. The sort of role of fireflies in the story is really, really well done, I think. There's a translator's note at the end, which I thought was a really good element and really interesting in this edition, and the translator talks about how the writing style of the original Japanese story was meant to be really difficult to read, both on a sort of technical level as well as an emotional level, and sort of why she's chosen to make some stylistic changes in the way that she has presented the story now. And the translator, Ginny Tapley Takamori, talks about sort of both how this obviously is a story very specifically about two children in Japan in 1945, but it is also a story about, you know, what happens to children who are left orphaned and destitute and starving by war and conflict. So it's a story that, you know, decades after it was written, even more decades after it's set, still feels incredibly relevant and powerful, and just one of those things I think everyone should read. The other thing I found really interesting in the translator's note was the discussion of how the story is sort of semi-autobiographical, but obviously, as I said, you know from the beginning that both these children die, but the story is inspired by the author's own life and his experiences, and his little sister did die during the Second World War, but he survived, and he always felt that though he was a child himself, he hadn't done enough to save her, and so this is sort of like a tribute to her, which just like yeah, so I'm very, very glad that I read this finally, because I've been meaning to for a while. It has made me really want to rewatch the Studio Ghibli film. And I feel like maybe I should also add, if you've seen a few Studio Ghibli films, the sort of like general vibe of Studio Ghibli often feels sort of like magical, strange, fun adventure with some dark themes, but often magical and uplifting, at least to a certain extent. Grave of Fireflies is not. That is a truly devastating film, and I do really want to watch it again because it's been a long time since I saw it. And I do just, think Studio Ghibli are fantastic. Anyway, that's a tangent, but I would highly recommend reading Grave of the Fireflies and watching the Studio Ghibli adaptation, which I think is a pretty faithful adaptation of the book. That's all I have to say on this one. I think a really interesting read, and I'm very glad I read it. And I'll be back tomorrow with another bookish video.